Let's talk about the number one law from the Diary of a CEO. Grab your cup of tea and let's dive into it. The Diary of a CEO was written by Steven Bartlett, who is known for being a marketing guru, a really successful entrepreneur at a young age, and he's also one of the top podcasters in the world. He has the podcast called Diary of a CEO. In his book, he talks about 33 laws for business and life. And importantly, he highlights that it's not a book about business strategy as such, because strategy has to change like the seasons. It has to respond to the environment around it. And what I really love about this book is that the 33 laws are really timeless and they are going to be relevant no matter how you apply it. Today I want to talk specifically about law number 1 because I feel that it is actually the most important law in the book, and that is to fill your buckets in the right order. So Bartlett talks about these 5 buckets that we have, and they are what you know, which is your knowledge, what you can do, your skills, who you know, which is your network, what you have, your resources, and what the world thinks of you, so your reputation. But really importantly, these buckets are described as being all interconnected, which means that you have to be able to fill each bucket before you can move on to the next one. What he also highlights is particularly the importance of the first and the second bucket, which is your knowledge and your skills. The reason being that when it comes to your other 3 buckets, your network, your resources, your reputation, those things, no matter how well they are potentially going at the moment, can be taken away from you. Whereas your knowledge and your skills is something that you can control. So what I want to talk about today is how you are potentially investing in those 2 buckets on a more regular basis, and how you can integrate this idea of making sure that you are filling those 2 buckets as a part of your professional development, and doing this in a way that is going to set you up for long-term success. So let's talk about bucket number 1. How are you investing in your knowledge? Now, maybe for some people, this is potentially pursuing formal qualifications or certifications in your area of interest, or things that will advance your knowledge in a particular industry or field that you want to be able to excel in. But what I would just be cautious of is sometimes those degrees and those certifications can just end up almost collecting dust, in terms of you get it once and you have this really wonderful achievement, and you don't necessarily then actively work on continuously updating your knowledge in that area. And so whether you have a qualification or not formally, that's just something that I find is a really useful way to think about constantly improving your knowledge. It's that, those qualifications that you have are potentially dated, and you need to constantly be keeping up with the industry and asking yourself how you can do that. So I try and implement this mindset of investing in my knowledge almost every day through 3 key ways. And the first is reading. So I make a commitment to myself to read every day, and not just in my field of expertise, but I try and read in other areas as well to expand my knowledge across different disciplines too, and see where I can potentially connect the dots in a unique way. And sometimes you might even be reading something that you think is purely for fun and completely unrelated to anything you do for work, and find that there is a potential hidden connection there as well that might potentially spark some inspiration, or can give you a bit of insight into something that you weren't actually aware of. And research also shows that readers are said to have more knowledge than people that watch TV. So I'm not saying to not watch TV, I certainly do whenever I get the chance as well. But maybe before you turn on Netflix, you can consider just turning a few pages as well before you do that. The other way that I do this as well is by listening to podcasts. So I try and make sure that podcasts are a part of my daily routine. So I pretty much almost don't ever listen to just the normal radio anymore, and I try and just use any of those opportunities where I would just be listening to lots of mindless music or be just doing other things and seeing if I can almost habit stack, I guess, a podcast onto that particular activity, because you can learn so much in just the half an hour that you might have that you weren't aware of before. And this is something that I also try and make sure that I'm exploring a few different interests in this space. So while I do listen to marketing and business podcasts, I also have a lot of other interests as well. For example, my podcasts usually range from anything between personal development and politics. Third way that I try and build my knowledge every day as well is through the use of YouTube. So similar to podcasts allow you to have access freely to some of the most brilliant minds in the world. So you can access directly the thoughts of people who are leaders in your industry, even on a world stage. And of course, YouTube also gives you this opportunity. But what I love about YouTube is that because of the way that the algorithm works and the suggestions that it serves you, it means that you can also discover thought leaders in your fields of interest that you may not have ever heard of. So you didn't search them and look up their podcast, but they are on your home screen and you click on it and you suddenly find yourself completely deep in their channel. So that is what I like about just using the combination of those two platforms. So not just podcasts, but YouTube as well. So I guess I personally just try and really value the mindset of not letting your titles or your degrees lure you into this false sense of career security, because the world is always going to be rapidly changing and you want to make sure that you are keeping your knowledge up to date. But you also need to, of course, apply that knowledge and convert that knowledge into skills. So let's talk about investing in your skills, because really the accumulation of knowledge can actually be quite a passive activity. So when you think about reading, for example, the learning pyramid tells us that reading actually is a really passive activity. It's one of the most passive learning activities, and you only start to build your recall of those particular things that you have learned when you start to convert those learning activities into active activities. So when you are developing these skills, or when you're listening to your podcast or you're watching your favorite YouTube channel, how are you actually applying what it is that those people are talking about? So for example, you might have a side project that you work on in your after hours. Maybe you have a hobby that you are starting to explore a little bit more, but you're actually applying those skills. You're learning new skills. The way that I try and do this personally is by having my YouTube channel, my podcast, and my blog, because it means that I can't just read all of my books and drink my tea and relax and have this really passive learning experience. It means that I have to actually understand what it is that I've learned, distill down the key takeaways, see how I can synergize that information with other knowledge that I might have, see how I can relate it to examples about how I can actually apply that in my life. When I think about my early career, did I ever foresee that I was going to start a YouTube channel, to start a blog, and to start a podcast? Now, I can tell you, not for one single second when I look back to my earlier career. I had lots of ideas of the things that I wanted to do, particularly working for myself, and lots of professional endeavors that I wanted to explore. But I can tell you hands down that starting a YouTube channel or starting a podcast or having a blog for my professional work at least was certainly not ever on my consideration list. Yet here we are, and it's something that I actually have come to really, really love. And it just goes to show that you have that ability to adapt to your changing environment. And this makes me think of another law that the book mentions. So I just want to relate this conversation to law number 5 in the book, which is to lean into bizarre behavior. What Bartlett talks about in the book is that when something seems bizarre to you, weird, strange, however you want to put it, that is when you should be leaning into that further. So does something feel stupid to you? In that case, lean into it. Does something feel odd to you? Lean into it, because you want to be the person that is leaning into that bizarre behavior instead of the person that is leaning out. Because if you are the person that is leaning out while your industry, while the marketplace around you moves forward, then you are potentially going to be the person that is left behind. So make sure that you are constantly engaging in the kinds of things that potentially push your comfort zone, the things that you never thought you might be doing, because they could be the future of your industry. Remember that change happens at a very rapid rate, and this rate of change, the research has shown, is only going to accelerate. So how is future you going to be set up for success when it comes to your business or your career, and ensure that you have all of the knowledge and the skills that you need to be in the best possible position? And even then, make sure that you are constantly adding to your knowledge and your skills. Thanks so much. Subscribe for more like this, and I'll see you in the next episode.